Hello and welcome to the Personal Podcast, where we get to meet the real personality behind the professionals. Today I am speaking to Jo Tosh, who was formerly a principal lecturer at Teesside University as well as being a nurse, and currently is a Parkinson's advocate and public speaker. So Jo, thank you so much for coming on. How has your daily life changed since being diagnosed with Parkinson's disease?
Well, it's changed enormously. I mean, to start off with, I'm now retired on medical grounds, which was, as I'm pretty sure we all daydream about being able to not go to work. But when it's sort of forced upon us, it's not quite the same. So that's been probably the biggest change I've got. In a negative side, I've had to give up my professions, both being a teacher and being a nurse. The positive side is that I've now got much more time and nature hates a vacuum, so things fall into that space. And then from a physical point of view, probably I have to my daily life includes pain and discomfort in a way that it didn't before. So those are the main things, really.
Oh, bless you. And can you tell me more about your journey to discovering that you had Parkinson's?
Absolutely. It was about 9 years ago now, and there were lots of different things. So I was really tired, not just sort of I feel a bit weary, but absolutely need to lie down on the floor immediately tired. And I had a tremor, just a very sort of gentle tremor in my left side, in my left hand. I'd become a bit more stiff. But again, I didn't really realise that was an issue. I was tripping a lot, and I put that down to my shoes or the flooring. And my writing had got smaller and smaller and smaller. So there were all sorts of things that were going on that I didn't, and I was miserable. I remember saying to my husband at the time, I just don't understand why I'm so mardy. Just don't understand it. Everything's good, the life is good. Why am I such a miserable cow, basically? And it all made sense after my diagnosis. All these things, these separate individual things, all kind of formed a clinical picture for the consultant to be able to work with. And I was diagnosed on my very first visit to see him.
Wow. And I didn't realise it affected your mood so much initially.
Yeah, Parkinson's is it's the gift that keeps on giving, Charlotte. It's there are over 40 symptoms, and most people recognise the tremor and have a vision of in their head of maybe somebody who's older, who's possibly male, who's sort of stooped over and shuffling a little bit. But yeah, there's 40 symptoms, and they are non-motor and motor. So Parkinson's is when you have a lack of dopamine, and dopamine's a movement chemical, but it's also the chemical that we get when we're in love and we're...
Of course, yeah.
And when if we win the lottery, it's dopamine that comes knocking on the door. But yes, so serotonin, melatonin and dopamine all kind of exit stage left with Parkinson's. So mood can be an issue, and all sorts of other things, really. As I say, it's like going to the buffet, the worst buffet ever, actually sending somebody else to the buffet and them coming back with a plate of stuff that you're not going to like any of it.
Oh. That's a good analogy, but not so good if you're suffering that, if you're getting the plate.
Yes.
And last time we met, it was at an awards dinner, and I was just in awe of you. You turned up at this event, and you having just had major brain surgery. Was it about 4 weeks before
it was.
it?
I can't believe that I did that, really, when I look back.
And you spoke so openly about it, and you seemed physically really well. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I don't quite know. I think I was on such a high after the surgery, and I'd waited over, nearly 2 years for that process of waiting for surgery. And that had been that was a really interesting process because I had a camera crew that followed me around from not all the time, not in a stalky way, but Parkinson's UK were amazing. And when I was first told that I needed this surgery, which is called deep brain stimulation, I went online to have a look at what was there so I could learn about it, and it was a bit scary. Everything was out of date. The pictures looked horrible, and I said to my colleagues at Parkinson's UK, I'm sure we can do something better for this. I'm sure we can create something. I'm a nurse, so I'm not frightened of hospitals, and I'm a teacher, so I've got over myself. I know what I sound like, and I know that I look, I don't now think, oh, look at me. I think, I know. So I'm in a place where it's a unique situation that I've got. Maybe if I help describe what's going to happen with my journey, it might help somebody else make an informed decision about their own.
Wow. Yeah.
So, 4 weeks after that, after the operation, I was absolutely delighted to be heading out and putting sequins on, and I was just glad to be alive, frankly.
Wow. And I would have just never known. And the deep brain stimulation, that sounds quite scary.
Yes. I mean, I have trust issues, so I've often said I'm the sort of person who checks inside their sandwich before they eat it, if somebody else has made it, just to check that it's what it's supposed to be. Or going to a new hairdresser's fills me with dread. So the idea that I was going to let somebody drill holes in my head and took quite a bit of getting used to. And initially I was very reluctant to have it, even to think about it. But my symptoms had got so bad that actually in the end I was desperate for it, because I thought if it can give me some kind of quality of life, then I'm all over it. Trust be damned.
Absolutely. And you mentioned drilling holes in the side of your head. So what exactly did it involve physically?
So for those of you that might be squeamish, you have to put your fingers in your ears at this bit, go la 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 la, I'm not listening. So they drill a couple of holes in the top of your head, and into those holes are placed 2 long electrodes, one on either side, that sit in the area of the brain that causes a problem in Parkinson's. And then the wires from those electrodes go to a junction box, which is a bit like a lump of Lego that sits in the back of my head, and the wire from that then goes down my neck into like a pacing box. So I have a scar on my chest with a sort of so I have to charge myself up twice a week. I'm on 3 bars as we speak, Charlotte. It's all good.
I hope they won't drop.
Yeah. The awful thing is that if I don't charge myself up, my surgeon knows, because she can tell remotely what's going on. So when I go to Newcastle up to the RVI to be reviewed and to have my settings rechecked, she can see exactly what it's been doing and whether or not I've been charging it and whether or not I've been dipping too low in terms of my battery.
Wow, that's remarkable.
It's insane.
How do you do you plug yourself in to charge yourself?
If you've got a telephone charger that you put your phone onto,
yes,
it's a bit like that, except I have a sort of it's like a little scarf that sits around my neck.
Right.
It has a hole in it for the battery charger. It bips until it finds the device, and then it stops bipping. So I know it's in the right place, and then I just have to sort of let it charge for about 30 minutes.
Wow, that's incredible. And is this quite new technology?
Weirdly, no, it's not. I think that it's one of the reasons why I was so keen to do something with Parkinson's UK, because people tend to think that this is a therapy that's the last ditch resort for Parkinson's, whereas actually it can be. It's not going to be suitable for everybody. There's quite a sort of strict screening process to make sure that the right people are offered it, and it's not going to make your symptoms worse. So if you tick all the boxes and jump through all the hoops and get through it, then it's improving all the time, and this device will be, blown out of the water. I'm going out to the World Parkinson's Congress in July, and I'll be seeing the reps from Boston Scientific who make these devices, and they'll get smaller and smaller, and eventually it'll just be like a little, I don't know,
like a microchip or something.
Yeah, it'll be like earrings or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
It'll all be sort of. Yes, it'll be fine. It is
incredible. And how aware of are you day to day that there's electrodes in your head?
I do yoga, and I still haven't. I don't think I'll ever do a handstand again, because even though she said to me they're not going to move, I don't. Again, trust issues. Will they move? If I do a cartwheel or something, they in theory won't move. But I have to sort of. I'm easing myself into that. But when I sleep, I can feel the junction box. That's a bit
a bit annoying.
So that I'm getting used to, and it is settling down. And the wire here, sometimes I'm aware of that, and sometimes I'm not particularly bosomy, so there's not a lot to hide this box thing in. So sometimes I have to be careful about even if somebody hugs me too hard, I think, it's a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, oh, sorry. I think I went in for a couple of hugs.
No, you were all good.
Okay, cool. And I love how you were instantly thinking about others as well. You know, how can I help other people? How can I use the skills I have as a lecturer, as a nurse, to help make this a less frightening experience for others? Like, that was just amazing.
Well, I don't. It certainly wasn't immediately. It took me about 2 years before I could even say Parkinson's without shame and without feeling. It was a really difficult time when I was first diagnosed, because I felt very isolated. I didn't know any other women who had Parkinson's. There weren't any celebrities that I knew who were women who had Parkinson's. I felt pretty much like I was the only woman in England, or possibly the world, who had it. And obviously that's being a bit dramatic, but it felt very much like, I remember saying, this is going to sound really awful, but I had to go for an MRI at the time to rule out a brain tumour.
Yeah.
Which could have been the other reason why I could have been experiencing the symptoms that I had. And I was devastated when I didn't have a brain tumour. And that's messed up because I think, I thought if I've got cancer, people understand cancer. You can fight it, you can have surgery, you can beat it, that sort of thing. You can use those sort of combative words. Whereas with Parkinson's, there's no cure yet. And so it's about accommodating it, learning to live with it, knowing that it's degenerative, so it's going to get worse over time. And that's brutal, actually. That's a hard thing to come to terms with. And I had counselling on and off for a couple of years, which really helped me to sort of wrap my head around that. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. And to say that you felt shame, like, what made you feel shame?
I don't know. I think because I remember initially saying... well, actually, when Archie told me that I had Parkinson's, my exact words were, "Oh dear," but I just kept thinking, I can't have this. I can't have this old man's disease. And again, I thought it isn't a disease. It's just it's a cluster of symptoms. So it's not. You don't catch it. It's not something. It's just there's a cluster of symptoms. So what if you have the stiffness, the low dopamine that is caused by the low dopamine, a tremor, and slowness of movement? Those three things alone can be enough to diagnose Parkinson's.
Wow.
So yeah, it was the last thing on my mind, and I don't know. I thought it would change the way people perceived me. It definitely changed the way I perceived myself. And I had this notion in my head that I've come from a long line of well people, so I just had the narrative that I had in my own head was that I was going to be fit and well till forever.
Yeah,
until
I think we all do, don't we?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, my dad's 86 and still biking places, and he's only just stopped rock climbing. And you think, so it was quite hard to come to terms with that. But when I've spoken to lots of people since then who've been diagnosed with Parkinson's, shame is a huge issue. And again, once I wrapped my own head around it, it was one of the reasons why I talked about it so much on social media, because I was thinking the only way that you can obliterate shame is to talk about it.
I agree, and that's one of my motivations for doing this podcast. Not just shame, but just feeling of guilt, all negative emotions attached to why we don't talk about things. And I think talking about it is the answer.
Yeah, Brené Brown is.
Yes.
There's God, Oprah, and Brené. That's not necessarily in that order at times.
No,
but yeah.
absolutely.
So she talks a lot about shame and about the fact that if you share your story with the right people in the right way, it can be incredibly powerful. And I've had some of the most extraordinary messages from people all over the world, not just from the UK, about. So I couldn't call. I struggled even to say Parkinson's. I used to say my diagnosis, and then eventually I started calling it Mandy. Since Mandy came into my life, until my daughter said, "You can't call it Mandy because that's a street name for a drug."
Oh,
so not great. And then I contacted this lady. I met this lady from online through Instagram who lives in Brazil, and she calls her Parkinson's James. I I'm not the only nutter out there.
No,
it's great.
I like that. My periods have an alter ego, Pat. She's terrible. She comes and visits from Benidorm or wherever she's been holidaying, and she makes my life misery, and mainly my husband's life misery as well. I think it helps to give it an alter ego to something sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
But how crazy that you couldn't bring yourself to say it.
Yeah, I think. The other thing is that I've always been a nurse. I was the older sister. So again, being a bossy person who's in charge of looking after other people isn't sort of easy to let go of. And particularly giving up my career was absolutely brutal.
Oh, that must have been so hard.
I think if you cut me in half, one side says South Tees Health Authority and the other side would say Teesside University.
Yeah.
So I think nursing particularly, even though as a teacher, I think primarily I've always seen myself as a nurse. And so.
Do you think that's also why you've thrown yourself so much into, becoming an advocate for Parkinson's?
I think it's probably, it's made sense. It's felt a comfortable transition for me to do that. And I think there was a lady called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross who in the 60s talked about the stages of grief, so you see it often in people get angry, they get depressed, they go into denial, they'll bargain, if only this, I'll do that. And eventually you get to acceptance. And they've added a new section to the stages of grief, which is to find meaning. And we often see that after an accident or after a tragedy, the people will fundraise or they'll try and do something to make some sort of positive sense out of what's happened. And I think that for me, the advocacy has also helped me find meaning. It's given me something to do. It's given me something that I feel I've given something back, that I'm contributing to the world. My dad I talked about, he says we've all got something, we all need to get up for something. We all need a reason to be awake in the morning. And that's been something that I've been doing.
That purpose, and I'm sure you'll be helping more people than you'll ever realise by doing what you're doing.
Gosh, I thought I set the bar. If I help one person, then that's good. That's enough.
But surely you're getting a lot of messages back from people saying how much you've helped them.
It's been incredibly humbling. It's certainly given me the courage to go and put myself out there and do things like this. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, it's you're so brave, being able to speak about this. I have so much respect for you. And you mentioned before you were worried about how it would change the perception of you. How has it changed some people you know's perception of you?
I'm sure my relationships with. I think it maybe on two different levels. I think there are people who haven't yet met me who are told that they're going to be meeting somebody who's got Parkinson's, and when they meet me, I'm not what they're expecting. So I think that there's a couple of journalists who've got in touch over the past who are doing pieces, and I've said to them, can you just Google me before we chat? And it has changed their attitude almost straight. They kind of go, oh, because I'm not. I don't know what they're expecting, but it's not been that, and that's I think quite good to recognise that Parkinson's is not a one size fits all. It affects people of all different ages. I mean, lots of people with young onset, and some of them are very young. Some of them are pregnant. Some of them haven't even started thinking about having a family yet. And so there are people who, I was 47 when I was diagnosed, but I've been very lucky to have had a healthy life up to that point, whereas some people are living with Parkinson's right from the word go.
I never knew that. I never knew it affected young people, really young people.
Yeah.
Obviously,
when I got home, actually, it's one of the things that I remember from the day that I was diagnosed was I had a lot of leaflets that were given with me, and one of the leaflets inside it said Parkinson's and pregnancy. And I remember thinking, oh my God, can you? At that time I kept thinking, can I imagine? Could I imagine being pregnant and having to deal with this at the same time? I just thought, I thought, bloody hell, those are the people who are really brave, who are dealing with small children and who are still working. And again, I was lucky enough that I was able to retire, but there are people who don't have the luxury of a pension. And, so there are people in refugee camps at the moment, all those displaced people. There'll be a significant number of them. It's 1 in 37, I think, who are likely to have Parkinson's.
Didn't know that.
And they're going to be without their consultants, without their meds, without the support they need. So what's already a traumatic situation, and that's just there'll be all sorts of other long-term conditions, of course, that are going to be that people have to deal with. So yeah.
And is it? I know you mentioned 1 in 37. Is it increasing?
Yeah, it is. I think that's partly because we're living a lot longer as a population. So my I think that what my consultant said is if we all lived to be 140, we'd all have some element of Parkinson's. But for some people, for a reason that they're not really entirely sure about, we lose our dopamine much more quickly than other people. So you start getting symptoms when you've lost about 80% of your dopamine. So...
And do they know the reasons why some people lose dopamine sooner than others?
Well, there's lots of... Again, you'd think that it would be something that'd be quite important, a bit like Alzheimer's, isn't it? It's such a devastating thing. The cost to families is huge, to individuals, obviously, to businesses, but we're a bit of an ageist society, so people tend to think, oh, it's only for older people, and that's for the decision makers. That's some point off in the future.
Okay.
So I think the only reason, I think at some point somebody significant and wealthy and influential will either experience it themselves or have somebody that they really care about experiencing it, and then we'll see a change.
It's a shame it has to happen that way, but I guess there's also limited resources out there too.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
So you are doing an incredible job raising awareness. I think you've been on TV, you're speaking about it now. What else are you doing to bang that drum?
Well, initially I was either doing bits of fundraising myself or being involved. But my friends have been amazing. They've raised a fortune. People have run marathons and the Great North Run and jumped off high buildings and all that kind of malarkey. So there's been the fundraising. We had a silent disco, which was an epic way to raise money. Brilliant. So can we not just do something that's nice where nobody has to be getting up at 4:00 in the morning to go training for it? Let's just
idea.
Let's just have a disco instead. That was a really fun way to raise awareness as well. And so there's whether it's been Chat magazine, where I was sort of placed in between babies at my werewolves at my baby, and aliens came down last night and zapped me up. I was sort of wedged in the middle of those two. It was a very, very kind thing for them to offer to write about Parkinson's, because the people who are reading it are not necessarily going to recognise those symptoms.
No.
And there was an article that I did in Metro, and somebody read it and then went straight to the doctors and was diagnosed on the back of that. So that was really special.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Because getting effective treatment quickly can improve your sort of prognosis long term.
Right. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's so important to speak out about all the symptoms.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they're so diverse. As I say, and I was a nurse. I'd looked after patients with Parkinson's.
Wow. Yeah.
And but I hadn't realised that it's called micrographia, which is a small handwriting, which is a real telltale sign. The fatigue, the tripping. Sort of, you don't swing your arms when you're walking. There are some really interesting and rather niche symptoms that you not everybody's going to recognise. Yeah.
No. Wow, it's incredible what you're doing, and also I think you've made some celebrity friends, haven't you, from your TV appearances?
Oh, it was the funniest thing in the world. I was very kindly supported on my trip to Steph's Packed Lunch in Leeds by one of the Parkinson's UK doctors. And I think, I don't know who was more shocked, me or her, that there was Duncan from Blue, who was so lovely. And she was like, she was mouthing at me, nobody said he was going to be here. It was so funny, but he was amazing because he has a friend, Lisette Anthony, who's an actor. She was in a film called Krull in the 1980s, which was like, we all had a bit of a girl crush on her. Yeah. And I think she's been in EastEnders. And so he has, he was very, very keen to understand my experience because he has somebody who's in the same boat in his life. So, yeah.
Oh, a big Blue fan. I told you that when we first met and you started messaging him. So, yeah, fangirling you for having celebrity friends like Duncan. Okay, so what advice would you give to someone who is diagnosed with a life-altering disease like Parkinson's?
Well, that's such a good question. And I don't know whether or not I'm qualified to answer it, really, because I think with anything that's any long-term condition takes a lot of getting used to. And I think you've just got to find your own way through it. There'll be people with lots of advice, and I think but if it's long term and degenerative, that's a whole different ball game as well.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So knowing that today's as good as I'm going to be, it sort of is a bit messes with your head, because actually we often have these fantasies, don't we, that everything's going to get better, but when you know it isn't, it's so my top tips, things that I've learned, are that we can't control the world around us, even if we really want to, but we can control how we react to what's going on around us, and that gives us something to hang on to. It's given me something to hang on to that gives me some agency and makes me feel like I have something. So yeah, even on the bleakest of days, I have an opportunity. I have a choice. Do I get up? Do I stick my head under the pillow? And I think to say yes to things, to outrageously wear your best clothes all the time, to overdress to pretty much every occasion.
Oh, I love that.
To not wait.
Yes.
I went. Parkinson's has been awful, and I wouldn't wish it upon everybody, but on anybody. But I've done things that I wouldn't have made time for if I hadn't have been diagnosed. I'd been threatening to go to the Chelsea Flower Show for 25 years. 25 years. Every time it'd come on the TV and I'd think, oh, I've missed it again. And the first opportunity, I thought, well, that's it, I'm going, because I don't know whether or not I'm going to be well enough in the future to go. So it's a silly example, but it gives you a flavour for, I say yes now to things and put things in the diary with purpose. So rather than say, oh, yes, let's do that at some point, I'll pin somebody down and say, when are we doing it? And how's that going to work, and how are we going to make that happen? And as a result, I've had, an exciting few years.
Oh, I think that's amazing. And you're right, there's too many people saying, I'll save that for best, I'll save that for another day.
Yeah.
Do it now. I need to take that advice sometimes as well.
Yeah. I was in London at the weekend, and there's a woman on wearing the most spectacular, amazing outfit. And I just sort of said to her, oh, I love your dress. And I said, are you going somewhere special? She said, I'm going to church. And I thought, good for you.
Yeah.
She looked like she was going to be, she could have been on stage somewhere or going to a wedding or something. But yeah, she's going to church and making an effort. And I thought it was really lovely.
Oh, and good for you telling her as well. Some people are just like, wow, you look great, but they won't say it. I think
It's awful, isn't it, where somebody knows that they're being looked at, but you think, my default setting is, oh God, there must be something on my face.
Yes, me too, and there usually is something on my face or in my teeth. And what has been the most surprising or unexpected thing that you've experienced living with the disease? Sorry to interrupt, but just a quick word about our sponsor, Be Daily. I've been subscribing to the Be Daily now since starting my business. It provides relevant and informative information directly to my inbox, not just about the North East, but also national news. If you're interested in subscribing, we'll put the link in the description box so you can get the business news directly to your inbox. Now back to the podcast. Sorry, it's not a disease, is it? A condition?
Yeah,
what's the right way to...
It does still get called Parkinson's disease, but it used to be Parkinson's Disease Society, and they're just Parkinson's UK now.
Right, okay.
So I think they're just trying to drop the disease because it's not correct, basically.
Yeah.
So the most
unexpected, perhaps you thought, I guess we've talked about it a little bit in the way that you thought it was always an old person and it was just the classic tremor symptom. Is there anything else that surprised you about the diagnosis in maybe a positive or negative way?
I think it's probably that we all of us, and me in particular, is a bit of control freak. I think we think that we know what's coming, and you see people, it could be that it's a good thing, so the lottery winners, falling in love, whatever it might be. We hear people's stories and we think, oh, my goodness, and that would never happen to us. But it happens to some people. So whether it's good or bad, it's recognising that life is unexpected. And, so to be prepared as much as we can to accommodate changes, because they inevitably do come. Sometimes they come in as little tiny segments, little tiny increments, but sometimes they wallop us and hit us with a saucepan. And I certainly fell into that category. Yeah, and I have a question in my head. It's a bit strange, but is it better to die suddenly of something and just not know, or is it better to know that something is coming and then you can maybe, like you're doing, get to squeeze in as much life into those years as you can? What would you rather? I think what I'd rather happen would be to be on the journey that I'm on, and then to get hit by a bus.
Okay.
So because I've had so much love directed at me, I've had kindness directed at me, which I'm not saying it wouldn't have arrived, but people are more likely to smile, to be kind, to offer a hand, to be positive, and I think that recently I saw Fern Cotton was at somebody's funeral. It was a living funeral, so the lady whose funeral it was at it.
That's a good idea.
And I often think that when celebrities might die, and then there's this outpouring of love for them, and I think, oh my God, they would have never have known how much they meant to all these people and how sad that is. Mm-hmm. So I think on that level, my life is richer and full and glorious, despite the fact that it's a shit show. I'd really rather avoid a protracted demise. And Parkinson's there's no two ways about it. It can be brutal and it can be so debilitating, and I try not to think about it too much because it would scare me half to death. But sort of try and but I've already got sort of measures in sort of place to sort of skip off to Switzerland if I can.
Oh, interesting. We just talked about that on a previous podcast, and how we really believe that it's cruel that we can't do that here, whereas we wouldn't do it to our animals if
absolutely.
So, yeah.
And it's about dignity in death, isn't it? Having a good death.
Yeah.
And for me, I wouldn't want to be if I lost my cognitive self, if I wasn't me anymore, if my memory went, and of course it's a brain problem, so dementia can run quite high in people with Parkinson's.
Right. Okay.
So if I couldn't bear it, I couldn't bear the fact that it would cause pain and discomfort to those people who love me, not just from a physical point of view, but I think if I wasn't me, then I think I'd much rather float off to Switzerland, have a vodka and death chaser, and be gone, and just
I agree. Yeah. I'd hate to think of myself as a burden on anyone.
Yeah.
But so brave of you for again talking about it. Like, I guess the question would be almost like, how do you know when it's the right time, especially if your mind isn't functioning right?
Well, I think that's the awful thing, is that you can't at that point. You could have a living will say, if I get to a point where I'm no longer if I don't recognise the people, if I'm physically debilitated to an extent that not only can I not look after myself, but I require a great deal of support. If I've got no dignity, I couldn't. I mean, I'd absolutely hate that. I'd hate it.
Yeah.
But having those conversations, it's one thing to write them down, but again, people who love us generally don't want to think about it.
No, but it's important, especially if it's your wishes. And I love that idea of a living funeral as well. Just exactly what you're saying. Some people save the best things to say about people until it's too late. And I don't know what made me aware of it, but a few years ago, I started telling everyone exactly what I thought, particularly family positive, not negative. But just, for example, I thanked my uncle who helped coach me through when I was younger playing a lot of water polo. And I'd just never said these things, but I thought, you need to hear it, how it really impacted my life and positive. And he was like, oh, thank you. You've made an old man very happy. And I just think, why do we as humans hold that back?
I don't know, but I think when you start behaving like that, it's this lovely virtuous circle. I think that I've received so much love and kindness from all sorts of people that I know and who I don't know, and who are sort of willing me on to do well and to succeed and to be happy, and it's wonderful. It wouldn't happen. I'm not saying we can still sort of meet new people, but I think the Parkinson's is something that it affects a huge number of people, whether it's parents, grandparents, or loved ones, or somebody might have it themselves. But so I think there are a lot of people who in one way or another sort of they're interested in my story, and they're happy when I'm happy, and it's to live as well as we can with whatever we have. There'll be somebody who would look at my situation and think I'd give my back teeth to just have Parkinson's. There's always somebody who's got it worse.
Yeah.
And so I think I think we had the videos that we did with Parkinson's UK went to the Charity Film Awards back in March, and we were very lucky that we won a People's Award, People's Choice Award. But we were up against, in the category, there was one, and it was Action Aid. And I was almost mortified because I was thinking, oh my God, there's me moaning about having Parkinson's, and these are women who have got no health rights in Africa, and the maternal death rates are so high. And I was thinking, it was almost embarrassing for me to be sort of, you can't compare like for like, obviously, but yeah, there are some things that are significantly more difficult to deal with than what I'm dealing with.
I think everything's perception, though, at the end of the day. Maybe there'd be people in that situation that would disagree, that maybe they'd say, well, we might not have rights, but we've got our health almost. I don't know. But, it's speaking very humbly there about it. But in terms of kind of perceptions and reactions, how did your relationship with your family, how did your family deal with it?
I think that they were probably super shocked. I think that my daughters have both had very different ways of dealing with it. One of my daughters tends to try not to think about it. She just sort of gets on with things, and it's almost like it's not a thing. My other daughter was just about to go off to uni when I was diagnosed, and she had real guilt. She almost said, I remember her saying, I can't go. I can't leave. And I said, oh my goodness, that's the last thing. It's good for me to be happy, and you leaving and going and having a big life will make me happy. And it's sort of, nobody wants to think about their somebody that they care for being ill.
No.
But I think it's also, it's placed a great deal of hardship. I think if you've got family doesn't always mean love and connection. Sometimes families can be quite tricky and quite difficult, and there'll be people out there who, whose relationships might be hanging on by a thread as it is, and then this could come along and make it much more difficult. And conversely, sometimes it might be the glue. It might be a glue that would stick people together, and all of a sudden it changes. Mm. I think it's not a one size fits all situation at all. But I've had a lot of love around me, and I think that I'm incredibly grateful for that.
Oh, amazing. And something that Bianca said on her podcast actually was that you almost had to manage people's reactions to what you were telling them. So on top of dealing with the condition that you now had, you had to also then deliver bad news, but then also manage their reactions afterwards, which I'd never considered before.
Oh, 100%. It's exhausting. Actually, I'll go back to that previous question about what would I suggest to somebody who's got a long-term condition, and would be to tell people in an email or via text. And it sounds really impersonal, but it gives people time to sort their heads out, because when you tell people in the flesh, they want to make it better and they can't. And I've had people burst into tears. I've had people say the most extraordinary things. I mean, awful things to some extent. It's like a sort of Tourette's that people have. That,
oh, really?
Yeah.
Like what was the... You don't have to say it if it's...
No, it's not upsetting. It's just I'm trying to think about saying it's the person. It's
okay.
So protect the identity.
You don't have to say it.
No, not at all. But so there's one person who basically said, "How was I doing?" And I said I was fine, and she looked really upset. And I said, "Well," I said, "Do you know somebody with Parkinson's?" And she said, "Oh yes." She said, "I do." She said, "Yes, but they were dead in 3 years, dementia, it was horrendous." And then said, I've got to go now, and walked off. And I was thinking, oh my God. I was at work at that point, and I just sort of twirled my chair around and put my sunnies on and had a big cry.
Oh, bless you.
But I think even the difficult things, it all stems from love and kindness. But giving people a chance to sort their feelings out first, and then be able to react to you in a calmer, more considered way, I think helps avoid that. And again, that you don't end up looking after somebody else. And if you've got I apparently have lots of people in my life, so I had to sort of tell a lot of people in a lot of different circumstances, whether it was through uni or through I was a nurse for a lot of years. I worked in lots of different areas. We've got a massive family and lots of extended friends of the family. So letting people know was quite challenging, and not everybody is. Sometimes people who we were expecting sort of tears and distress from, we don't get it. And sometimes there were some people I was absolutely gobsmacked how hard it hit them. I had a couple of people who said they had to leave work, they had to go home for the day because they couldn't function. I was thinking, I didn't even think they liked me that much. I mean, it was bizarre.
It is strange, isn't it, the way it impacts people in different ways, and also what people decide to show or can't control what they show. And has your partner been supportive throughout it?
Oh, it's a good question. Yes and no. I think my marriage ended at the beginning of last year, and I suppose it was complicated. Would it have ended anyway? Probably. Did the Parkinson's place a huge burden on the relationship? Yes, it absolutely did. And as I say, it changes the dynamics of everything, really. You know, I remember as sort of the things that we used to sort of daydream about and talk about, and, you know, sometimes you'd go for a walk and you think, oh, one day we'll live in that house, or we'll go and do this or we'll do that, and those conversations had stopped for a while. So knowing what's coming and knowing that it's going to be really hard takes quite a lot of courage for anybody, really. The most extraordinary thing is that I've met the love of my life.
Wow.
I mean, who knew? Who is kind of not actually choosing me on purpose, knowing that I'm a shit show and knowing that it's all going to drop to bits possibly, and still loves me. I mean, wow. So yeah, it was a difficult year last year. I had my surgery, my marriage ended, but a year later, I've got somewhere new to live. I'm super duper happy. I'm giddy, according to my children.
That's so lovely. I'm so happy for you. It's incredible. Wow. It might seem like a terrible question to ask, but you almost, not that I knew you before, but just the way you've spoken about this almost your new life, you seem happier.
I'm so happy. I feel like I need to pinch myself at the moment. It's slightly terrifying, and I again, because I want for this. This is when I don't want to have Parkinson's, because I know what's coming. And the DBS is not a cure, so I still have Parkinson's, I still have the symptoms, but this is just keeping them at bay. The motor symptoms it's keeping at bay. The other things are marching on regardless. And it scares me, for me, obviously, because I'm a normal human, but it scares me that I don't want to sort of... and I've had this conversation with my new partner to say, I don't want for you to end up being in a situation where you feel duty bound to stay with me when it gets tough. And we've talked a little bit about what we can and can't do to manage that and to make me feel less worried about the impact that it might have on him. But he's still sticking by me at the moment, so long may that continue.
Oh, that's just lovely. And the hard conversations to have at the start of a relationship.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really it's not the conversations you want to have, but as I say, there'll be people who are out there who today in the morning will be getting dressed, and tonight they'll be in coronary care, or they'll be. When I worked in coronary care years and years ago, there'd be people in there who'd been at weddings, they'd been in the garden, they'd been cooking Sunday lunch, whatever, milking cows. Nobody gets up in the morning and thinks, at tea time I'm going to be having cardiac surgery or whatever. But nonetheless, these people exist.
Yeah.
For me, as I say, I know it's a known unknown. Michael J. Fox brilliantly described it as being tied to the railway line. You just don't know how quick the train's coming, or even if it'll take it. What I hope is that they'll cure it before it all goes to hell in a handcart.
Is there a cure on the horizon?
I want to say yes, but not so much. No, there are treatments which are going to help, hopefully, which are in the pipeline, which are being drugs which are meant for one thing, which are being repurposed, which might help slow down or slow the progression of the disease, or even help us identify quickly when somebody has Parkinson's. But at the moment, there's no cure. So that's a bit bleak, given how many people, it's 145,000 people in the UK have Parkinson's. About 10, I think it's 10 million worldwide. Yeah, so it's massive. But as I say, because if it is, if people were more aware of the young onset and the life changes it has for those people, I think that there might be more fundraising or more money spent on the research. But the Parkinson's UK and Cure Parkinson's Trust and Michael J. Fox Foundation all do amazing jobs, and they're just sort of 3 of the biggest charities. There are lots of others that are doing great and glorious things out there. So hopefully somebody somewhere in the moment, while I was sat here, somebody could be in a research lab somewhere shouting Eureka.
Absolutely. Or maybe the AI, the artificial intelligence, might figure it out, how it's meant to be hundreds of times more intelligent than humans, and that movement's happening fast and changing the medical world. Hopefully that might find a cure sooner than we think.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? It's all to play for, but I hope that there's... I say for me, I've been very lucky that up to now I've had a really great life. If suddenly I did get hit by the aforementioned bus, I wouldn't want anybody to be sad because I've had a great life. I mean, I really have. I've had the most brilliant time. But I think that there are people who are too young to be dealing with this. That they really are, brutally bothered by the symptoms, and it's relentless. But that's the other thing about Parkinson's, it's absolutely relentless. The pain that I get was driving me insane, and when people have a tremor or dyskinesia, which is this sort of movement that you can't control, it is awful. Even when you're watching somebody like Michael J. Fox, you almost don't want to watch it because it looks so uncomfortable watching his body, and it's just as uncomfortable being on the inside of that.
Yeah.
So before my operation, I just said I wanted to just unzip myself and climb out, just to have a break, from it.
Because it does look very uncomfortable, but I never realised just quite how painful it can be.
Oh yeah, I mean, and chronic pain's difficult. So a friend of mine said, I didn't realise you had pain, Jo, you should say. And I thought, well, that's going to get boring quite quickly. I'm by the kettle. Do you want a cup of tea? Oh, by the way, I'm in pain. I'm sitting down with my tea. Oh, I'm still in pain because it's chronic.
How do you deal with that?
We just have to crack on. I had Botox to try and ease some of the discomfort. So I was having injections into my leg and my shoulder and my forearm, and that helped a little bit with the pain relief. They wouldn't do my number 11s. They refused. Oh. I did say I was a woman of a certain age and it would be really beneficial to me, but she was having none of it. None of it.
You don't have any wrinkles anyway.
So, yeah, but it's, because somebody said, well, can you take some paracetamol? But it's not that kind of, it's like having cramp the whole time. Well, but that was what mine was like, but everybody's different.
Yeah, wow. And cramp is incredibly painful as well.
Yeah, so while we're sat here, I've got cramp all at my left leg, and so it starts in my foot and it goes, so all the muscles are kind of switched on. And it's like the on and off muscles are all switched on at the same time. So you've got this kind of weird fight going on. So my leg's still, but everything's switched on. And I think by the time it gets to bedtime, I'm ready for bed.
You must be exhausted. It must feel like you've run a marathon every day.
Well, there's a really great analogy which says it's with Parkinson's again, the stiffness. It's a bit like wading through water or wading through mud. It just takes a bit more effort to do everything because your joints are so much more stiff.
Oh, bless you.
So, but I say there are lots of symptoms that I have dodged so far, so that's all good.
And do you need a break or anything with that symptom? Right now?
No, not right now. Okay. Thank you.
Wow, but you're just so used to dealing with it.
Yeah, it's just normal life, isn't it? I mean, I do Reiki, and it's really difficult sometimes because I'm in the middle of holding somebody's head or something like that, and I can feel this hand start to sort of just to really struggle. And I think I don't want to spoil this person's experience by having my weird hand kick off. But anyway, it's just one of those things.
It's the enhanced experience, more power, more energy this way.
Yeah, we have to channel it into cocktail making instead.
And it's so, nice is the wrong word, but you can almost laugh at the condition.
I think you have to. I think there are people who deal with things. I think my daughter thinks I've got a terrible sense of humour based on my nursing, I think. I laugh at the most humour can be used in a way to cope with all sorts of things.
Yes.
And so, yeah, maybe I'm lucky that I've had an NHS training in it.
Oh, bless you. Just running through any other questions I've missed out. I think we've kind of touched on this, but I'll ask it anyway, just in case there's anything else. How has your diagnosis influenced your outlook on life? Is it more just like maximising the joy in every moment?
I think it's about, rather than maximising the joy, I practice gratitude as an absolute thing.
Yeah.
And I do that every day. And I try to be grateful for what I would have previously considered the small things, because the small things, I think, end up being the big things.
Mm-hmm.
I think appreciating a nice cold glass of water, or the fact that you've even got a tap that runs, or trees, or anything really, it does help change your perception. There's always something to be grateful for.
I totally believe that. And you have mentioned sometimes that it would be easier to just stay in bed, pull the covers over your head. What gets you out of bed now in the morning?
I'm happy. I found peace with it, with having Parkinson's, and I think that some of the life choices that I've made along the way have meant that I've met new people who are also either in the similar situations, or who've been kind enough to help me experience different things. And yeah, it's I think I just feel very lucky, full stop. My life is not at all what I'd expected it to be, but I've now helped found a beach cleaning group, and which gives me great pleasure to be involved in that and to watch the impact that it has on the beach locally. And yeah, there are so many different things that have happened because of Parkinson's. So it's an little wind that doesn't blow any good at all, my nana would say.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our attitude. Somebody said to me that it sounds a bit strange, but it was kind of that they envied. It was kind of, oh, you're really lucky to have the time to not be working, and I think I'd really rather be moaning about work.
Exactly. That's the thing. People judge situations and they don't know the full story, and they obviously they can't be expected to know everything. But
No.
it's a flyaway comment like that.
But I think that's also because the way if I project that I'm smiley and life is good, and life is all of those things. But it is also hard, and there are days that I don't. Sometimes I don't pull the covers. I don't get up, and there's sometimes I can't, and I have to manage. I have to dip out on things, the experiences that I'd love to do, and I can't manage them physically, or I know that they'll be too tiring. So I have to pick and choose. But again, it's about I could choose to be miserable about that sort of stuff, or I can choose to be grateful for the stuff I can do. And that's the key to it, I think, in essence, is we can it's the glass half full and glass half empty situation, isn't it?
Yeah, no matter what your circumstances are, I guess.
Yeah, 100%.
And how's your mood? Sorry, were you about to say something else?
No.
I was just going to say, how's your mood at the minute? Because you seem very happy and positive. Have you been able to have some drugs or something that can help with the dopamine?
I have. I take all the drugs.
Brilliant.
And I take an antidepressant now, which I put off that. I didn't want to be a person who needed to take antidepressants. So I rallied against it, but it was such a good idea. And to give you an idea of my mood at the time, before I took my antidepressants, my eldest daughter rang me to say that they were remaking Mary Poppins. And I cried for 25 minutes because I felt so bad for Julie Andrews. Oh, poor Julie Andrews. No one will know that she was the original. I was absolutely bereft. Poor Julie. I mean, I was in a state, and I thought, this is not right. This is not right. And then I started some new meds, and then watched The Notebook and never shed a tear.
Wow.
Which apparently means that I've got no feelings whatsoever. I attended a funeral of my friend's mum, her funeral. I almost wanted to stick forks in my leg. I was so embarrassed because I wasn't crying. I was really sad. I was so gutted and sad for my friend. No tears came at all. So I've had to sort of tweak those meds. And
don't take it on sad when days you're meant to feel sad.
but I did shed. I went to see ABBA at the weekend, and I did shed a lot at the end of the sort of the AI concert. I cried and cried and cried. So I can now cry, but it doesn't happen very often now. So my mood is good, but it's chemicals that are helping me stay that way.
Yeah, I didn't realise that was almost an output that you struggle to cry on antidepressants. But
I'm sure that there are some people who don't. But I went from almost not crying about everything, to not really being able to cry at all.
And for you to say it's just chemicals, I guess that's, at the end of the day, that's what we are. It's chemical signals in our brain, the dopamine, serotonin, melatonin, all the other ones.
Yes, so for example, lots of people with Parkinson's struggle to sleep. So I struggle to sleep, but I also have I have very bad nightmares. And one of the fun things about living with Parkinson's is that when you have your nightmares, you actually live them out. So if you're screaming in your sleep, you're screaming in real life.
Wow.
Or if you're karate chopping a demon in your sleep, you're karate chopping the poor sod who's laid with you in the bed. So so again, that can play havoc. You can imagine if you've got somebody who needs to get up for work the next morning and they've been sleeping with somebody who's karate chopping and screaming through the night as they have their nightmares.
Yeah.
That person wakes up relatively well rested, and that the person who they've gone to, the person without Parkinson's wakes up ravaged and sort of looking like they've been hit by a saucepan. So.
Oh, goodness.
So, but yeah, it's again melatonin. We take it for granted, but it's quite important.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your brutal honesty. Again, I just think you're so brave. We do always end the podcast on the regular 10 questions. It's on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best, how you rank yourself at 10 personal things. So the first one is, how good looking are you, Jo?
Well, based on what we've just said, I don't think I'm very good looking, but I'm a 10 compared to what I'm going to look like not very long down the line. So I'm a great believer in people. I'm very grateful for the bits of my body. So it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm learning to love what there is.
Good.
So yeah.
Good. How funny are you?
5, solid 5, I reckon.
How good at cooking are you?
Oh, 2.
Makes 2 of us. I'm probably lower, actually. How good a singer are you?
Previously, probably a 5, and currently a 1.5.
Does it affect your voice?
Yeah,
singing?
yeah. My voice has disappeared altogether, so the strength of my voice... I used to be able to sing pretty badly, but now it's even worse. My range is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Eventually, I'm just going to be able to hum one note.
Oh.
But yes, that's another little fun thing. Because your vocal cords are a muscle. So
Of course, yes. Oh, bless you. Drinking alcohol, are you still able to drink alcohol with it?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I'm supposed to be, but I am.
Brilliant.
I would say that I had 4 gins at the weekend, which
Splendid.
I was spangled, but my daughter says that that's pre-drinks for her. So yes, I think I'm not a strong drinker.
Oh, and does it help your symptoms?
I don't know what it helps my mood. Definitely, it helps my interpretive dance enormously.
Love it. Parenting skills. How would you rank yourself?
Oh God, 10 for effort, 4.5 for results.
For sure, you're being harsh.
No, my kids are phenomenal human beings. But yeah, I think it's more their good luck than judgment.
No, I doubt it. How good a friend are you?
Oh, that's a range. 0 to 10. Sometimes the same person in the same day. I'm not very good at paying attention, so I'm not very good at remembering things and birthdays and that sort of things. But I love my friends 100%, and I take a bullet for a considerable number of people.
Oh, that's lovely. Intelligence. How would you rank yourself?
If only I could remember things. Then I'd be cooking on gas.
It'd be dangerous.
Maybe a 4.
Okay, I mean, and I always say, Ryan's probably sick of hearing this, but intelligence, there's so many different dimensions to it as well.
Yeah.
I'm incredibly stupid at a lot of things, but I can be quite good at things too, so It just depends what they are. How kind are you?
I'd like to think that I'm high. I'd like to think I'm an 8.
Lovely. And how good at sex are you?
100.
100. Fantastic. I suppose
I did a straw poll. I asked 100 people in the street how good I was, and they all said 100. So there
fantastic. How it's just, a bit worrying how easy it was to find people that you have that experience.
I shall finish with with Parkinson's, some of the meds that you have make you behave compulsively.
Right.
And I once embarrassed myself by basically saying, when I was started on this new medication, they gave me a huge amount of literature to go with it to say, if you suddenly start gambling, or if you start having, having loads of tattoos or whatever. And I said, it's all right if I start having sex with strangers on the railway station. It's just the meds. Thinking I was hilarious, and they didn't think I was hilarious at all. I think they thought I was being serious.
Oh. Maybe they thought it can happen.
Stage left. It probably can.
Right.
Yeah. So yes, I haven't done
But
that.
I was going to say, for the record, is that what's going on right now? Okay.
Sadly not. No.
Either way, if you're happy, brilliant.
No. Do you know what I was compulsively doing? Was weeding other people's gardens. How embarrassing is that? Taking my marigolds out with me because I could not leave the weeds alone in other people's.
I'm sure they were grateful. Were they not grateful?
Well, I had to fess up in the end and knock on people's doors and say, I'm really sorry, but I've been weeding your garden. And some of them left me gloves and bags out to do it.
Wow. If someone had done that to my garden, I'd be like, thank you very much. Keep taking your meds. Oh, bless you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Hi, it's Ryan from Harvey and Hugo, and I am the videographer here. So, are you looking for a new way to stand out in today's crowded digital landscape? Well, look no further than podcasting. Here at Harvey and Hugo, we specialise in creating and producing high quality podcasts that engage and inspire audiences. And with our comprehensive production services, we'll take care of all the technical details, from the recording and the editing to the distribution and the promotion. With millions of listeners tuning in every day, it's the perfect time to start connecting with them on a deeper level. Let Harvey and Hugo help you unlock the power of podcasting and take your message to the next level.